Right everyone, today we're here for my round 19 AFL tips and predictions. Let's take a look at round 18. And it was a score of 6. It's decent. It's not amazing without being bad. We'll take a look at some of the tips that I got right. We got Geelong over Collingwood. I thought that was pretty decent. It was a toughish game to tip. Sydney over North Melbourne. Hawthorn over Freo. But the rest of the Saturday, as you can see, really disappointing for my tips. Carlton to beat Western Bulldogs. Obviously, that was probably the upset of the round. Saints to beat the Crows. I just don't want to talk about that game. Let's just leave it there. And Essendon to beat Melbourne. I really thought the Bombers would be better than that, to be honest. But they just couldn't play the conditions, and the D's youngsters were great. I said the Suns to beat the Power, which was a pretty decent tip. The Giants to beat Richmond, and Brisbane to beat West Coast. So 6 out of 9. It isn't too bad. I'm almost at 100, as you can see, with the total scores. I'm still yet to use my second joker. The people that were using their jokers for this round, some used it quite well. Calweave and Brian got a total score of 8. This guy must have started the other end, because look at that, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. He started round 18, and all of a sudden he gets 8 with the joker in his first round. As you can see right here, we actually had 5 people tip a perfect score. As you can see, their names are in green. Adelaide, Aldrin Shando, Jacko Stars, C. Welsh, and Andy TK, all with perfect scores of 9 with a bonus score of 10 in a pretty difficult round. Total scores, and we still have Swan Hunter, but the lead is starting to shrink. There is a 3-point separation between 3rd and 4th. I'm basically giving these guys shoutouts in every video. Clancy and Wrought Wasp also on 124. Well, I'll scroll down to see the top 50. So if you see your name in the top 50 with, how many members do we have now? Like 1,600, 1,700. That's the top 3%. So if you're in the top 50, that's in the top 3%. And if you guys want to join the comp, I will have the link down below in the description. As you can see, the prizes are pretty decent. To be honest with you, they're probably a little bit too high in terms of what I can afford. Now, you would have seen my fantasy. I've had 3 weeks in a row where I haven't even bothered changing my team. So if I'm sliding down the rankings, which I probably am, I haven't checked yet, then that would be why. All right, let's take a look at the big calls for last round. Only needing 2, so you would think I have a better chance of actually getting through with this round unscathed. The first game I said in Collingwood Geelong that the Cats would lead for 80% or more of the game. We're just going to scroll down here, and I have to say that's probably only just 80% or more of the game. Or is it? I can't do maths correctly. We're going to leave it at that. I think that's correct. The next one I said that Hawthorn would come back from 3/4 time and win. The Dockers were in front. So that means I'm technically through. All right, so I just took a look at all the other big calls, and they all incorrect. So I need to make sure that the Cats were in front for 80% or more of the game. And we are going back to the team stats, and we're going to bring up the calculator. Oh my God. As you can see right there, I was off by like 0.03 of a percentage. I said they'd be in front for 80% of the game. According to this, they were pretty much in front for 79.97% of the game. All right, so the one with the most likes was go to an NRL game and yell ball after every tackle. Well, I'm not doing it after every tackle, but I'll go to an NRL game and I'll yell ball after 3 tackles, or maybe 5. I'm not doing after every tackle. I'm not spending a whole game doing that. I get kicked out. We need to take a look at some NRL games to go to now. 3rd of August, Storm play the Dragons at 5:30 PM. I'll do it for that game. I'll go there for like 10 minutes because I don't care about the NRL. I'll yell ball, maybe after 5 tackles, and then I'm just going to leave the game and hopefully make it in time for Collingwood to beat Carlton. Now, if you do like what you're seeing with these tips, the punishments, all that sort of stuff, and you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, as you can see on the screen, quite a number of you guys are still yet to hit the subscribe button. And with the content starting to ramp up with not too long to go on the footy season, the Gold King Challenge later this week with a few big creators, why not hit that subscribe button? It does help out big time. We want to get to 40k. Before we do dive into the tips, I want to give a shout out to Adelaide, because I streamed on the Tuesday night, and he reminded me to spin that wheel, and look what I ended up getting. I got a 1. Oh my God, yes. This week is actually going to save me. This will be put in the tips video. Adelaide is the reason why I might not have to do a punishment this week. All right, well, for my tips, we'll start off on the Friday night, of course, with Essendon and Adelaide. Pretty big game of footy, honestly. I expect this to be a good one, to be honest. And this is a game I'll be streaming. So just keep an eye out if you are interested in my live reactions. If you guys tuned into my video on Monday, you would have seen that I said that I'd probably tip Adelaide in this video. Now, hold your courses. I'm not saying that I will necessarily. Let me explain. Whilst I did say I probably was going to tip Adelaide, I've decided that I need to think about the tip a little bit more. Essendon so far this year actually haven't lost a game yet at Marvel Stadium. And against sides, below them on the ladder or in the bottom 10, they've pretty much had a flawless record. We all know Essendon's wins have basically been against the bottom 10 sides, and currently Adelaide are sitting 14th. And once again, Essendon seem to play pretty well after a poor loss. They seem to bounce back in pretty good fashion. So I feel like, I guess the case that it's at Marvel, they haven't lost there. I've come to realise as well this season that the Bombers just can't seem to play in the wet weather conditions this year. And obviously against the Cats and now against Melbourne. So luckily this is under the roof at Marvel. It should give them more of an advantage. Yeah, why I said I wanted to tip the Crows is because I am starting to lose a bit of trust in Essendon. This is around that time of the season where they do start slipping away. And I feel like if they don't win this game, they actually might not make finals altogether. They're 6th currently at the moment, so they're not in the top 4 anymore. They lost that position and their season could crumble away big time. So they've got to beat Adelaide here. They were poor against the D's last week. They lost the clearances by 12 despite having the stronger midfield. Crows can win this game, I feel. They had another win at home, but they are a bit shaky at way, to be fair. And that last quarter, they were pretty dominant, to be honest. Phil Thorpe in his return game kicked a couple, and he seemed pretty lively. So he might be an important factor for this game as well. The fact that they're still without Rankin and a few other players, I feel like the Bombers should win this game. I'm expecting this to be quite an attacking end-to-end game between these two sides. They're capable. Essendon, to be fair, they haven't lost against Adelaide since 2017. So all of these factors are telling me that Essendon win this game. But I am a little bit surprised that it's 94% going Essendon. I thought there'd be more back in Adelaide, given the last couple of weeks of footy. But no, I'll say Essendon to win this game, but only just. Only just. It'll be, my opinion, game of the round. I'm going to say Essendon by 5 points. My big call that no team scores less than 3 goals in any given quarter. Next up, we got the Expansion Cup between the Giants and the Suns Saturday at 1:45 PM in Sydney at NG Stadium. Now, I watched AFL Goat HQ's tipping video on the Monday, and he was saying that this game was about as 50-50 as you can get. But I would disagree with that in a pretty big way. For starters, the record between the Giants and the Suns, I think in the last 13 games, the Giants have won in 12 of them. And this is one of those away games where, let's be real, the Suns can't play away. So I think there's 75% chance that the Giants win this game. The tipsters are saying it, and the tipsters agree. In fact, I think 96% are going to the Giants in this one. It's going to be really tough for Gold Coast. They win this game, and all of a sudden, they have a really, really good chance of making finals with a very easy, piss-easy fixture in the last 5 games. The Giants last week, I feel like they were all right. I watched bits and pieces of that game. Richmond competed well, but the Giants, were pretty efficient in their win. I think 47% of their inside 50s, if I'm not mistaken, were goals or at least scores, which is crazy. And that was technically their first win at the MCG against Richmond. So you always had a feeling Richmond would be competitive, in which they were. I thought it was a danger game for the Giants, and now they're starting to look a little bit better. They're starting to pick up a mini winning streak. That's the time of the season where the Giants start playing good footy like they did last year. The Suns were also pretty good. They were much better than they were the week before against North Melbourne. Unbelievably, this winning streak on home and away continues up until round 19, and it could honestly continue for the remainder of the season. Maybe they need to go into hypnosis, the Suns, to make them believe that this game is played at, Heritage Bank Stadium, because away from home, the faith for the Suns right now is about as low as it is for any side. Even North Melbourne and West Coast, they have almost more faith away in these sort of games. So this is a sort of game I think the Giants can win by quite a bit if they can get their form going. If Hogan and Green up forward can be alright. If Riccardi, well, he was pretty poor last week, but if he can, contribute with a couple goals here or there, I'm going to say the Giants win this game by a decent amount, honestly. I think they'll win by 35 points, and my big call is that the Giants win every quarter. Next up, we have St Kilda take on West Coast at Marvel Stadium. Now, the Saints definitely had a really poor performance against the Crows. After a pretty strong first quarter display, it has to be said, they dominated and probably should have been up by more. The Saints were pretty much nowhere to be seen after the first quarter. They scored 2 goals after quarter time. And the conditions, they played them really poorly. Their skills were poor. Everything about it was poor. They couldn't get, efficient enough ball movement up forward. There was just no creativity. It was a game that I wish I didn't travel to. You can watch my video on it, which is released yesterday. And it is now a disappointment that Philippou, who's had a good couple of weeks of footy, is injured for a month now. So that is just bad luck, but it's been a bad luck season for the Saints, to be honest. A season where I wouldn't be too disappointed if we finish 4th in the draft and we can get a decent draft pick and then go and hopefully respond next season. For West Coast, well, I'll give them credit. They came close against a pretty strong Brisbane side. I think they only lost by 14 points, but it was probably always going to happen. Interim coaches always seem to respond, or not respond, but have really, good first games. I think before this game, the last 7 interim coaches in their first game actually won. So it could have been a win for West Coast, but Brisbane, they just had too much class for long enough. But they did seem like they actually wanted to win it for Simo. Obviously, he was there in the stands to the coin toss. I have seen a few people in the tips backing in West Coast, which sort of surprises me. I feel like West Coast away from home are terrible. They haven't really come close against any side that I can think of off the top of my head. And against St Kilda had a good win against the Swans. They're back in Marvel. I can't blame the conditions. I'm hoping that the Saints can have one of those games where it's stress-free, the forwards are clicking, and we should score over 100. I'll say the Saints win pretty comfortably, hopefully, by 45. And my big call, I reckon Cooper Sharman, he was alright against the Crows last week, especially in the first. I reckon he'll kick 4 or more goals. Next game we have is a really big one, honestly. We have Hawthorn and Collingwood at the MCG. The biggest game this Saturday, and I just about reckon it's the most important game between both of these sides since 2011. One of the biggest home and away games that we've seen between these two sides in quite a while, because it shapes up the finals race massively. 13th and 12th on the ladder, but a win here, or a loss, more importantly, for whoever loses, probably puts them out the finals race, to be honest with you. And I'm hoping I can maybe even get a ticket to this game, but I'm worried if it's a sellout that might not be the case. Now, obviously, Hawthorn on the weekend got a big bounce-back win over Freo. I thought they were going to respond, and they did after a shocking performance at GMHBA. They looked more structured with Sicily back on the side, and how about Nick Watson? He kicked the match winner in the dying minutes. That was about the only bit of the game I watched because I was on a flight to Adelaide. Collingwood, however, they're currently in struggle town right now with 3 losses in a row, and if they lose this game, I'm almost putting a line through their season in terms of making finals, because they still have games against Carlton and Sydney to come. I'm pretty sure another pretty difficult game as well. So a tough fixture. This needs to be a win for them, but it's going to be difficult right now because it just seems like they're a little bit out of it. They couldn't keep up with the Cats for long enough last week, and the longer the game wore off, the more they dropped off in that one. It does seem like injuries this year and a grand final hangover might be getting the best of them this season, and I think the Hawks are deserving of being the favourites, and they're currently the favourites, although more people are tipping the Pies. Despite that, though, I expect another Hawthorn win right now. They're on form. They can knock off Collingwood. They did it last year. They almost did it in Gather End when they were pretty shit this year. So they're in the much better form. And I really think if you are smart, you tip the Hawks here, because what really are Collingwood going to provide? Does it seem like they want to win this game as much as Hawthorn? I'm not too sure. I'm saying Hawthorn win by 19 points. And my big call, we get a crowd over 87,000. That would make it the biggest crowd home and away between these two sides since 1981. Next up, we have Geelong take on the Western Bulldogs. Quite another important game when it comes to shaping up the 8. More for the Cats with the top 4 chance than the Bulldogs. Well, I thought they were out of the race with a tough fixture up ahead, but that win against Carlton is pretty much shifted everything at the moment, and who knows? I mean, the Cats, they're probably the most informed team in the comp, or just about one of the most informed teams in the comp after that poor loss against the Blues. They're really bouncing back, and with the fixture remaining, they've got a really easy run. They can easily win the next 5 or 5 of the next 6 and maybe even make top 2. If you saw my Monday video, you would have seen the Cats finish quite high at the end of the season. They win this game, and it's going to look really good for them. They got a good win against the Pies last week, and a pretty tough game to tip for a lot of people, but the Cats were in the better form, and they started really strong with the first 3 goals of the game. And I'll give a shout out to Lawson Humphries as well. He won the Rising Star nom with a really strong game. I think he had over 20 touches and 95 or so efficiency. And a bit of a shout out to Sean Manor for making me over $100. I had him on for first goal scorer randomly. I'm just like, screw it, we'll see what happens, and he won it. So thank you, Sean Manor. For the Western Bulldogs, however, they're a side that you just can't predict this season. Like, literally, for 11 of the 17 games the Bulldogs have predicted this season, I've gotten them all wrong. And I think in the last 5 games, 4 of them I've gotten wrong as well. So I feel like because the Bulldogs are involved, whoever I tip will probably lose, although the Cats have definitely been a lot more consistent and easier to tip than the Bulldogs have been this season. Their win last week, though, was their best win I think they've had all year against Carlton in a big game to bounce back, especially for Cripps' 200th as well. For them to win in that sort of game, that was pretty significant and massive for the Blues, especially after starting the game as well with a goalless term with 0-7. They rebounded massively. Jamara was huge, and Rory Lobb, the fans are actually starting to come to like him because he's continuing his solid form also. It's not at Marvel this game though, unfortunately for the Dogs, and that's where they play their best footy. They seem to respond quite well at Marvel. I feel like if it's at Marvel, you just tip the Dogs this season. They've pretty much won every game they've played there. It's at GMHBA, and the Cats have a pretty strong side right now in form. I think they'll just be a little bit too dominant. Unfortunately for the Dogs, I don't see a win happening, but they are very much capable of winning this game. But I'm going to say the Cats to be safe by 13 points with my big call that the Cats lead by 20 or more points at quarter time. And the final game on the Saturday night, we got Port Adelaide take on Richmond, and this needs to be a win for Port Adelaide. In fact, it not just needs to be a win, it needs to be a big win, because percentage at the moment, I think for Port, let's just have a look at their percentage. It could do a bit of work, 103.4, so a big percentage booster would be hopefully required for the Power in this one, because if they lose for whatever reason against Richmond here, they've got a tough fixture their last 5 games. I don't think they're going to make finals. I think they're almost out of the race. It's hard for the Power here. They're in a bit of inconsistent form. They were good for a couple of weeks, then they went back to crap. Against the Suns, they were okay for bits and pieces, but I thought they were chasing tails for a lot of the game. Again, for the times that I was watching the game, it just seemed like they weren't able to win as much of the footy as the Suns were, and players like Dixon and Finlay and lace, and they struggled for a lot of the game. They were a bit of a liability. The scoreboard almost flatters the Power a little bit because that last quarter was definitely dominated by Gold Coast. Richmond actually played, half decent against the Giants. They had a crack for 4 quarters, which is probably all the fans want to see. The class did get the better of them, but they won in a few decently major stats like inside 50s, clearances, and surprisingly free kicks, which I don't know if it's true, but some are saying that's the first game this year where Richmond have won the free kick count. I wouldn't be surprised if it's close, but I just feel like Port Adelaide need a big win. They were able to beat the Bulldogs massively a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to say they do it again. They just have to. They just have to for their season. I'm going to say the Power win by 69 points. And my big call, Port's big 3 mids in Butters, Horn, Francis and Rosie combined for 4 or more goals. Alrighty, for the Sunday, we start off with definitely one of the games of the round. It's pretty even on the odds. We have Brisbane and Sydney, $1.90 a piece. For the Lions, at one stage, they were sitting in the bottom 6 around 5 or 6 weeks ago. I thought at that stage, their season was basically over, but they've won 5 in a row and are now somehow in the top 4, and theoretically could finish in the top 2 with how shit of a start they've had all year. Even though they have won 5 in a row and have been one of the better sides in the last 6 weeks, probably almost the best when it comes to wins, I don't think they've been playing their best footy, and their opponents haven't been the best either. Like, they've been winning against the Eagles, the Crows, the Saints. Like, they've all been in the bottom half of the ladder, to be fair, and even in the games that they've been playing, they haven't been able to put them away massively. To be fair, it doesn't matter when they get in the wins. They're now top 4. But this is their real test though now. They're finally playing a good quality side. It is at home though, but against some good sides this season, the Lions haven't been able to get the wins. It was an important win though, given the circumstances last week, because it just had to be done. I thought the Eagles were always going to be tough in a game like that. Neil was massive once again, and Lohman was really good in that last quarter as well. Sydney last week had a big win over North Melbourne after a couple losses in a row. It was an 80-point win. Not many would have expected that big of a win. I know maybe early in the year you would have, but not with how good North have been as of late. Basically every player for them contributing well, and they were doing it into Northside, who are in some pretty good form. Their best 5 weeks they've had all year. It was good to see Luke Parker back on the side as well. He kicked a couple in his first game back, and if he finds form now, it'd be pretty dangerous considering the Swans are already that dangerous side in the competition. Obviously they were without Heaney last week with that suspension, which obviously I thought was quite stiff, so it'll strengthen their lineup for this week. And I guess whilst we're on the topic of suspensions, no Charlie Cameron for 3 weeks. I have no idea what's going on with the AFL right now, with how soft they've become with some of these suspensions. Like, that was a perfect tackle. But as for my tip, it is a tough one to be fair. I still feel like the Lions have a few levels to get to, whereas Sydney, I'm a bit more confident of them showing up here. So I'm going to say the Swans win this game. I might stream this one. I reckon they're going to have that 1 quarter where they win the game from the 1 quarter. So I'm going to say the Swans win it by 18 points. And they'll kick 7 or more goals in any quarter. Next up's Fremantle and Melbourne at Optus Stadium. And it might honestly be the first time, or at least the first time in a while, where I've seen a game played during this time slot on a Sunday in Perth. The Channel 7 game on a Sunday is almost never in Perth. Freo have dropped now to 5th after their loss against the Hawks, and it was a game that they probably should have won. I feel like they'd be quite flat after losing that game, when it was pretty much neck and neck all day in that one. And I'd argue they probably would have won the game if they kicked a little bit straighter. But once again, no teams this season have been able to win in Tassie. It's just almost impossible. So they'll be back at home hoping that they can turn their form around there and maybe push back into the top 4. As for the D's, however, they recorded a really surprising win, it has to be said, against the Bombers last week. And I feel like everyone right now might be down on them a little bit too early. They're still in the 8, but Gaunt should come back in a couple of weeks. And, wins like that could really help them come back into finals contention. And if they can get a win against the Dockers here, when a lot of people probably aren't expecting them to, all of a sudden, we might have to legitimise the D's once again this year. It's good to see Goodwin shaking up a bit right now with Melbourne. Their wins have been come from the youngsters that have been rejuvenating their squad, to be fair. Turner, McVie and Windsor were big on the weekend. And I feel like this game was at the MCG, which, to be fair, their form at the G this year has still been pretty solid. I probably would tip the D's, but it is at home for the Dockers, and I feel like, they've been getting a really good crowd at games so far this year. I think they can get their home fans up for this one, and I think they're just overall a better side. I'll still say the Dockers win it by 24 points, with my big call that the D's record a 5 or more behind than they do goal. And the final game of the round, we have Carlton and North Melbourne. The Blues have suddenly now dropped a couple games in a row, and after probably almost being a lock to finish top 2 at one stage, are well and truly now in the pack, but they're probably lucky they've got North Melbourne in this game, to be honest with you, after last week. I think this is probably the lock of the round. If there was a gauntlet tip, I'd probably say Carlton's the gauntlet tip. They're probably almost no chance of losing this one. To be fair though, I feel like the lack of Carlton scarf, in which I had the last couple of weeks, may have been a curse into why the Blues have lost a couple of games in a row. Realistically, yeah, Carlton should win this game, you would think. And hopefully I can try and make myself over to this game. I'm pretty sure Lenny, which a few of you guys might know, he'll be helping out on the mic on the big game. So I feel like it'd be pretty cool to watch that. Plus, I haven't been to a neutral Sunday game in like 4 weeks. But I don't really think the game in itself is going to be too great or competitive, to be fair. I feel like the Blues, after a couple losses in a row, they're going to want to bounce back into form. They'll be desperate for a win because, let's just say they lose this game, they could drop to as low as 5th or 6th at the end of the round, which would be quite, crazy. I feel like Carlton's concern over the last couple of weeks is when opposition teams start to get a bit of momentum, they are unable to withstand that momentum, and we saw that the last couple of weeks with the Giants and the Dogs after they started strong themselves, the Blues. And it was pretty disappointing for Carlton to not find the win for Cripper in his 200th. But in his 201st, you would think that Cripper, who's been in some really good form, can hopefully find a win there. I wonder if North will show anything. Will they be competitive? Will it be close? Will they, stand up after a really poor game against the Swans? Or will their, confidence be shot? And which I'm kind of fearful that it will be. It's another tough game in a row for North here. One against the Swans, another against the Blues. I have a weird feeling for North that this could be another game where they get absolutely smashed in. And I'm going to say the Blues win it by 54 points. With my big call that in both halves, the Blues score 10 or more goals. Alrighty, let's quickly review the tips. So I went Essendon, St Kilda, the Giants, the Hawks, the Power, the Cats, the Swans, the Dockers, and the Blues. So the Swans are the only team this round where I'm going to be tipping them as the away team. Till then, we'll see you soon for the next one. Should be a goal kicking challenge, so stay tuned. It should be a good one.